As I mentioned the other day, there are two decisions by governments that could have disastrous ramifications for Indigenous communities in remote and regional parts of the country. That is the decision by the Northern Territory to scrap mandatory alcohol bans in communities where grog was outlawed as part of the intervention nearly 15 years ago. And then there's the decision by the new Albanese federal Labor government to axe the cashless debit card that's being trialled in regional communities around the country. These decisions were targeted last night by the new Coalition Senator Jacinta Price in her powerful first speech.
I could not offer two more appalling examples of legislation pushed by left-wing elites that are guaranteed to worsen the lives of Indigenous people. Yet at the same time, we spend days and weeks each year recognising Aboriginal Australia in many ways, in symbolic gestures that fail to push the needle 1 micromillimetre toward improving the lives of the most marginalised in any genuine way.
Gutsy, cut-through stuff focusing on crucial life and death issues. And so strong is this argument advanced there by Senator Price, at least on scrapping the alcohol bans, that it crosses party lines. Even though there is a Labor government in the Northern Territory, the new federal Labor MP for Lingiari, Marion Scringemore, also an Indigenous woman, well, she opposes the lifting of the alcohol bans too.
When a government puts in a protective regime of that kind and leaves it in place for that long, you can't just suddenly pull the pin on it without any protection, sanctuary or plan for the vulnerable women and children whom the original measure was supposed to protect. To do that is more negligent. At the level of impact on actual lives, it is tantamount to causing injury by omission. It is like pulling your forces out of Afghanistan but leaving your local workers and their dependents in harm's way on the ground without an escape plan.
Well said, a first-term MP too. This is policy that matters. This is where governments can make decisions that can help to save children and women and families from despair. This is the sort of practical policy where we have to listen to the voices of Indigenous people.
It is not good enough that the streets of our Northern Territory towns and other towns across regional Australia have gangs of children aged 6 to 16 wandering around with no adult supervision in the early hours of the morning. It is not good enough that almost all of these children have witnessed or been subject to normalised alcohol abuse, domestic, family and sexual violence throughout their young lives and is a reason for their presence on our streets. Such neglect in great numbers would not be accepted in the prosperous suburbs of our capital cities.
Yep, Jacinta Price is one senator who's going to make a difference. She'll be joining me later in the program. But look at what happened when her call was taken up today in question time by her leader, Peter Dutton.
Prime Minister, the Coalition strongly supports the cashless debit card for welfare payments to working-age recipients where alcohol and drugs are a problem. Research from the University of Adelaide showed that the cashless debit card led to a 21% decrease in gambling and 45% of people believed it had improved their lives. Prime Minister, to please an inner-city woke audience, you've abolished the card. As Jacinta Price points out, it will result in higher instances of domestic violence and assault in Indigenous communities. Why make a bad situation worse?
We're about empowering communities, not taking power away from them. That is an important distinction between our attitude and the attitude of those opposite. Not a patronising position that says we know best.
The study found that any reduction in alcohol and drug use could not be directly attributed to the effect of the card.
Look, I think it's just hard to fathom that Labor is actually going ahead with this. If the cashless debit card saves the life of one woman or helps one child get through school, surely it's worth the effort. And common sense, as well as the on-the-ground evidence, tells us that this initiative will do a whole lot for many, many families and their communities. Instead, Labor, for seemingly ideological reasons, is going to scrap it. Labor wants to deliver an Indigenous voice to Parliament. So how can it ignore a persuasive Indigenous voice in Parliament?
My goal is to halt the pointless virtue signalling and focus on the solutions that bring real change, that changes the lives of Australia's most vulnerable citizens, solutions that give them real lives, not the enduring nightmare of violence and terror they currently live.
Now, I reckon you can have a practical focus. You can make the decisions and have that can make a difference, the best decisions to make a positive difference. And I think at the same time, you can deliver an Indigenous voice to Parliament. In fact, I think a voice will help Parliament hear the right stories, receive the best ideas and make the most useful decisions. That's the aim. And this is a point that the Prime Minister made later today in question time.
Our policies include 500 additional Aboriginal healthcare workers, investing in life-saving kidney dialysis treatment, Housing Australia Future Fund to repair remote housing, locally tailored justice reinvestment. We'll do all of that, but at the same time we want to work across the Parliament and indeed across the country to lift this nation up by recognising our First Nations people in our Constitution, giving them a voice to Parliament, which is nothing more and nothing less than good manners, consulting people on matters that affect them.
Now, I've got to say, I reckon the PM's right on that, but he should listen to Jacinta Price on the cashless welfare card.